The journey that swept me from my rural Texas hometown to about 1,000 people, all the way to Harvard Square on the East Coast, was driven by my interest in the brain, communication, and atypicality. I owed those interests to my relationship with my autistic brother, who I grew up very, very closely with. However, once I arrived at college, the journey I then set off on was more determined by my own disabilities and relationship to disability. Just prior to college, I had actually been seeing doctors about apparent hearing issues I was having, and it had been determined that I likely had an auditory processing disorder. As it happened, I wound up making a friend freshman year who was heavily involved in the Deaf Awareness Club and encouraged me to try taking American Sign Language courses. So I wound up taking the weekend courses, and I fell in love with the visual language and getting to know deaf people and deaf culture. And eventually I wound up enrolling in the official course sequences, which had just started to be offered at Harvard. Around the same time, I took a linguistics course as an elective for my then neuroscience major. I was concerned that my hearing issues would present challenges to some elements of the coursework and approached the professor with my concerns. She not only wholly accommodated me, but wound up introducing me to the field of sign language linguistics, which happened to be her domain. Because of that course and that professor, I ended up switching majors, joining a sign language research lab, and eventually went on to write an honors thesis about American Sign Language with that very professor. At the time that I was writing my thesis, a then mysterious illness was coming to a head for me. I was so severely fatigued I couldn't stay awake for all of my classes or even stretches of just a few hours. I was struggling to function, period, let alone the difficulty and stress of completing a senior thesis and applying to graduate school and trying to graduate. It became so severe that I almost took leave from school. However, upon an unexpected diagnosis of narcolepsy, which I had likely been battling discreetly for the past 10 or so years, I received life-altering treatment, and then I went on that year to become not only a first-generation college graduate, but the first from my hometown to graduate from Harvard University. And now I'm back in my home state of Texas pursuing a PhD in linguistics, where I do research on disabled learners of sign language like myself. I ask questions like how a diagnosis like dyslexia based on written and spoken language performance might translate to a sign language, or whether somebody with ADHD is going to have specific benefits or challenges in a sign language classroom in comparison to a spoken language classroom. While I definitely still feel imposter syndrome due to symptoms like brain fog, the department is very supportive, and the flexible schedule of being a graduate student is actually really conducive to my access needs. Moreover, my relationship to disability and identity as a disabled person has really grown over the past few years. And above all, I feel so lucky to do work that honors all of my connections to disability.